ladies.
One each. Mary's going to be speaking first.
Welcome, Bridget. Come on in.
How we doing, guys? How's everybody doing today? Hey, thank you all for coming out today. I really appreciate you all being here. And I just want to say, who was here last Saturday? All right, hey, thanks again for coming. And that's dedication right there, 2 weeks in a row. So thank you guys again. We had a great lineup today of speakers. So I think you guys will really enjoy this. First, we're going to have Mary Byrski, and she's with Byrski Estate and Elder Law firm here in Punta Gorda. She's actually a board-certified elder law attorney. She's going to be talking about legal documents and Medicaid planning. So we're going to let her speak. If you guys have any questions, we're going to try to limit the questions in the audience to 2 questions. But if you have any more than that, what we'll do is back in our hair salon, we'll make some time for you guys to sit one-on-one with her. And of course, if need be, she can always try to schedule a consultation with you guys. So Mary, I'll let you go ahead and take the mic, and we'll go from here. Thanks, guys.
Good morning, everyone. So glad you made it out here on a Saturday morning. A bunch of seminar junkies. You were here last week. Hello, people are waving at me in the back. How are you? All right, I'm going to jump right into this, and I'll just tell you, he said I was an elder law attorney. I've been in Charlotte County this is my 21st year as a lawyer here. I'm feeling old at this point. I just want you all to know that. So I've been here a long time, and I'm going to start by just kind of telling you a couple of rules on estate planning that I talk to my clients about when they come in. And I've asked them questions. You don't need to be here. You are my client. The troublemakers. With estate planning, I used to start with a question and say, does anyone in here think that if you have a will, that you're going to avoid probate? I'm not even going to ask you that question because then people don't really know what probate is, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But the answer is no. So a lot of people think that if you have a last will and testament, you're going to avoid probate. I'm just going to tell you a couple of rules. The one rule I want to say, or whatever, I'll call it a rule, is a will is an instruction to a judge. I don't care if you're from New York, people come down here, I'm going to pick on New Yorkers. They come down here and say, well, my New York lawyer said I don't have to go to probate, I have a will. Bull, 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 bull. It's not true. You're going to probate. So the bottom line is, if you have a will, or if you don't have a will, we'll talk about that. You should have a will, but a will is an instruction to a judge. So the next question becomes, what goes to probate? So an asset, and this is the second rule, if you die, but let me back up a second. A will only helps when you die. It is not helpful for any other reason. So a will only comes into effect when you pass away. It is not a document that your kids can take to the bank and say, here, give me my mom's money. She left it to me in her will. So just know it has to go through a court process. It's an instruction to a judge. The second thing is that a will is, if you have, I'm losing my train of thought here. Instruction, as far as beneficiaries are concerned, if you pass away, the rule is that if you pass away with something in your name alone, or there is no beneficiary on an account, that is an asset that will go through probate. Okay, so again, if there's something you die with in your name alone and there's no beneficiary, that asset will go through probate. Okay, so understand that if you have a joint account with your spouse, that account doesn't go to probate. So how do you avoid a court process is a couple of things. You can name someone in an account on the title of the account, but I highly recommend that you don't do that unless it's your spouse. So if you put your children in the title of an asset, their creditors can potentially come after that account. So if they get in a car accident or they get sued, I actually have seen a few occasions where your wonderful son-in-law that just filed for divorce against your daughter comes after your bank accounts because they know about those accounts. So be careful with titling your children in the account titles. The other thing is you can name beneficiaries on accounts. And I will tell you right now that a lot of my clients, I bet you there's several of you in this room that have bank accounts that do not have beneficiaries on them. So you can name beneficiaries on accounts, but there are some drawbacks to that. We'll talk about it if we have time. And by the way, I have 2 topics that I'm going to have to breeze right through because they take about an hour each, and so I'm going to give you the highlights as much as I can. And I do talk fast, so I'm trying to slow down a little bit here. But so basically, when you have an estate plan, so you want to avoid probate. A lot of people come in, they want to avoid probate, and the question is, why do you want to avoid probate? So to avoid probate, you can't, the reason why you want to avoid probate is because it takes a long time after you die. It generally takes about 6 months to a year to go through a probate proceeding with the court, and there's a court involved in handling your affairs. And then also it's costly, frankly, because of lawyers, which I'm one of. So what happens is the statutes allow for someone to take approximately 3% of the value of the assets that are being probated. Now that is always negotiable, but also the executor, in Florida it's called a personal representative, in most states it's called an executor, but in Florida we have to be different. So we call it an executor. So we call it a personal representative, not executor. But so that person can also take 3%. So what happens is your estate is paying out about 6% sometimes if you have to probate something. So I want you to keep that in mind because the number one reason we do a lot of trust in my office. And so I'm going to jump into a trust is really the number one way, in my personal opinion, to avoid probate if you're so inclined to want to do that. So a revocable living trust is a trust that you can change during your lifetime. It's not irrevocable. You own everything that's in the trust. And so what happens is you create this trust, and I'm going to give you an example so you have kind of in your head what a trust can do. A trust is a piece of paper. So Mary Byrski, attorney at law, owns a company. That company has bylaws that are created. That's all it is. It's a piece of paper that says Mary Byrski started a company. But because I started that company can hold assets. So the assets in my company, like my building, it's a really bad example because lawyers don't own a whole lot, but we own buildings, maybe we own a car that's in our business, but those assets are titled in my company. So if I pass away, my bylaws of my company say what happens to that asset, it doesn't have to go through probate potentially. So when you have a trust, it's just a piece of paper like a will, but you're creating it while you're alive, and you're the trustee, and the trustee is the manager. You're the manager while you're alive, and then when you pass away, you say, okay, I'm going to name my spouse, or I'm going to name my children to be the manager when I pass away. In that way, they can then distribute the assets that are in the trust, or titled in the trust, or you can also make assets payable on death to a trust. So remember we talked about titling and beneficiary designations. You can name a trust in the title of your assets, and you can name the trust as the beneficiary of an asset. So by doing that, you avoid probate when you pass away. So that's actually my favorite way to avoid probate with clients. And the key to if you have a trust, anyone in this audience that has a trust, the key is what I just said. You need to make sure your assets are titled in the trust or pay on death to the trust. Okay, so she has a question, but you can only ask 2 questions per person. I'm joking, that's not what I'm doing. Okay, so quickly, power of attorney. A power of attorney is a document that says I can basically act for you in a situation while you are alive, basically to manage financial affairs. I can pay your taxes, I can pay your bills, I can sue somebody on your behalf. Everybody in this audience should have a power of attorney because the reason to have that is it avoids guardianship. If you become incapacitated, and this is true between spouses, if you become incapacitated and you're in a nursing home or you have dementia and your spouse wants to sell your house in Florida, you cannot sell your own house without your spouse's signature in Florida. If you own a homestead, believe it or not, your spouse has rights in that homestead in Florida. And if you have a power of attorney from New York that does not say your spouse has a right to extinguish your Florida homestead rights, you have to go and get a guardianship for your spouse. And guardianships are very expensive. I would rather you die without a will and a trust than have to go through a guardianship. That's how bad guardianships are, folks. So don't get into a guardianship if you don't have to. And the way to generally avoid that is with a power of attorney. The other document you need is a healthcare directive or healthcare surrogate, and that is to designate who's going to make your health decisions. And I'm just gonna say that, again, it's very important. I'm not a medical professional, but the bottom line is people don't spend a lot of time thinking about healthcare direction and who's gonna make those decisions. And I do think you really need to think about it. You definitely wanna make sure that you are designating someone who has the same, I don't wanna say beliefs, but understands what your wishes are. And I will tell you really quick that years ago, I did it as a healthcare surrogate, and I'm not married, so I named my mother. And then one day, again, I did this, didn't ask her, and then all of a sudden we're having a conversation, and she said, I would never let you go. And then she also said she would never allow me to be cremated because the Catholic Church didn't believe in that. This was a while ago. And I said, well, that's it, Mom, you're off. And I put my sister on very fast because she pulled the plug on me in a second. But Chris knows my sister. So you know, you need to have that conversation and don't assume your children are going to do what you want them to do. Make sure they are agreeing. Because sometimes people say, well, I don't want Mom to go. Well, the reality is no one wants to go. But if your wishes are that you don't want to be in a nursing home with tubes sticking out of you, you need to make sure someone knows that, okay? All right, and then a living will, again, is the don't keep me alive by feeding tubes and machines. So again, it's important to have that document. Again, it is more important that you tell the person who you've given the healthcare directive to what your wishes are, because I'm sure Kevin can help me with this one, but Kevin Pillion is here, he's next. I have never seen a hospital just look at a living will if the spouse is standing there and go, oh, your husband wants to, no feeding tubes. Okay, they usually will ask you as the spouse, is this what your husband wanted? And let me tell you the rationale, because when you're being wheeled into a hospital, I actually had a client one time that told his wife, I revoke my living will and I want to be kept alive no matter what. So the hospitals will ask the person that's designated the healthcare surrogate, and sometimes clients get mad at me and they'll say, well, I don't want my children to be asked that question. Well, they will be asked that question, because you can change your mind verbally and revoke your document, your healthcare surrogate, and your living will actually anytime you want to. So just be careful. All right, I'm gonna jump into Medicaid, and I know it's confusing a little bit because we have two topics here. All right, Medicaid. I have a handout for you called Medicaid 101. And I'm sorry, do I even need this? Can you guys hear me, or better with this? Okay. Just a little bit over here. Okay, that's better. Okay, no, not helping. Okay, just so you know, when you go on Medicaid, or you're looking at Medicaid, we're usually talking about Medicaid for skilled nursing homes. There is some Medicaid benefits in Charlotte County for those who are at home and would like some assistance. There's no money involved. There's some services available under Medicaid if you qualify. There is also some assistance for assisted living, but it's very difficult to get those benefits. There's like a 40,000 person wait list to get the benefits, but we have gotten them. I've gotten them for a few clients in the last few years. So just know I'm primarily talking about if you ever need to go in a skilled nursing facility. The Medicaid will look at your income and your assets. And just really quickly on income is generally never an issue, because if you have, right now the amount is on there, it's $23.13. I don't know who comes up with these amounts, by the way, it's just some arbitrary amount. The $23.13 a month in income, and that's per person. So spouses, and one spouse can ask $23.13. The person going in the nursing home is who they're looking at. So the $23.13, we can do what's called an income trust. And I'm not going to explain that because it gets kind of technical, but the bottom line is you can put the excess money into an income trust and you can still apply for Medicaid. All of the income of the applicant is still required to go to the nursing home though. So it gets a little technical. All right, the spouse, if you have a spouse, or let's talk about assets. The person going in the nursing home can have $2,000 in assets, plus the assets that are on the list below, and I'll talk about that, the exemptions. And then the spouse can have $126,400. So what happens is, basically a spouse in the community can have I'm gonna add them together. The spouse in the community can have $128,400 and the assets on the list below. So what happens is there's exempt assets, and the exempt assets include your homestead up to $572,000. If you have more equity in your home than that, we actually have to take out the equity in the house and spend it down before we can get you on Medicaid. But I will just tell you, people ask me this all the time, who's determining the value? They basically look at the tax appraiser pages. They're not, and we all know that, at least in Charlotte County, that's really not the value probably of your house. They can't generally force you to go get a property appraisal done, but you can do a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis by a realtor. But I'm just telling you, for the most part, we use the tax appraiser pages for the value. I'm going to skip this one. The next one, I'll come back to that. You can have retirement accounts. So any retirement accounts you have, IRAs in particular, that are giving off monthly income to you. The way Medicaid works is they consider something either an income source or an asset. There's no in between. It's one or the other. So if something is giving off income to you, they're going to count it toward that income. But again, it's going to go to the nursing home. So income goes to the nursing home. So what happens is, like annuities, a lot of people buy annuities, and what we have to do is start taking a monthly income off of those annuities, but then the principal of that annuity is exempt. Now, I want you to be careful with annuities, because there's a lot of salespeople out there that try to sell people annuities. If you buy an annuity within 5 years of applying for Medicaid, they're gonna look at it and they're gonna want the state of Florida to be one of the beneficiaries. So your spouse can be a beneficiary than the state of Florida, because they're going to make an assumption that you created that annuity to avoid having the money go to Medicaid. So I've been doing this, like I said, 20 years. 10, 15 years ago, we used to buy annuities, huge annuities for people, and basically hide their money from the state of Florida, and then pay out $10 a month and have a balloon payment at the end of their children, and they got to keep the money. Well, they got smart and shut that down. So the bottom line is, if you have an annuity now, you don't have to annuitize it, or you don't have to run out and start taking money. You just need to make sure that you don't start buying a bunch of annuities right when you're looking at maybe getting some care in a nursing home, or if your spouse is ill or something. You can have a vehicle regardless of age, and I will tell you, generally, if anyone is in a nursing home, like if I go in a nursing home, I can have a vehicle. But for some reason, our area, and Kevin's area up in Sarasota is a little different, our area is now ruling that you can only have one vehicle per household. That is not what the statute says. So if my daughter lives with me and has a car, again, under their rule, only one car is allowed. But I'm just telling you that you generally can have one car per person, but we have to fight with them, so it's not worth it half the time. Life insurance, you can have life insurance, but the cash value has to be below $2,500. So if you have a lot of cash value, we have to take the cash value out and spend it down. And when I say spend down, what it means is we have to put your assets into these categories. So, you can have a burial account for $2,500. You can prepay your funeral arrangements, which Rick is going to talk about. You can do all that kind of stuff. The two big ones, that's why I was going to jump to this. The two big ones I'll jump to really quick is we do a lot of care contracts. So care contracts, if someone's going in nursing home, is a fast way to give money to your children or whoever you want to care for you. And it has to be based on your life expectancy. But if you move money to your children, the last thing on this page says there's a 5-year look back. And there's a 5-year look back if you move any money to anyone other than your spouse. So what happens is we do a care contract that says your children, mine's like 10 pages thick, and it has all sorts of stuff in it, like your children are actually going to visit you. And we make them, by the way, there's nobody checking this stuff, but they're going to attend care meetings at the nursing home. They're going to make sure your bills are paid. They're going to visit you, arrange doctor appointments, etc. It just basically says they're going to do all these things while you're in the nursing home, and you're going to transfer money to them and pay them to do these things, and it's legal. So it's an exchange for services. It's all based on your life expectancy. So if someone is 90 years old, I can move roughly $100,000, maybe a little bit more, depending on how much we're charging. And when I say that, you can pay someone based on the rate of a CNA in Charlotte County. Right now, we're pushing the envelope by doing $30 to $35 an hour. I've seen one in Sarasota where they did it for $60 an hour and got it through, Kevin. Yes. So I don't even know how some of these are getting through, but we were doing like 18, and then now we're doing 30 to 35, and they're going through with no problem. So so it's interesting. I don't even think that is the rate of a CNA. Somebody who does healthcare can tell me, but you're not getting that rate. They're approving them. Yeah. So so basically, it's based on your life expectancy, the rate of a CNA, and how many hours your kids are going to work a week. And so we generally put down like 20 hours a week. But so for someone who's 90, we're going to be able to move over $100,000 probably. If someone is 80, we can move $200,000 to $300,000 with the state of Florida. Now, the drawback is, there's always a drawback, that money is taxable to your children because you are paying them. So I'm just going to tell you guys this, you are supposed to, now you're in a nursing home in my scenario here, you are supposed to 1099 your kids the following year because you just paid them. Whether that ever gets done or not, as a lawyer, I tell people to do this, I don't follow up. I'm just going to shut up at that point. So let's just say I don't follow up on that, and I don't know if the IRS knows about these things. The other one that I got to tell you we've been doing a lot more with is rental properties. Rental properties, back up to the second one on my checklist here. Rental properties are exempt under Medicaid as long as they are producing, the net income goes to you as the person in the nursing home. So there are actually companies out there that we can take $500,000 if you are in a nursing home and give it to them to manage for you, because most people in a nursing home don't want to manage property, and neither do their children. So a lot of times we will just buy into some of these rental companies, and they will actually manage rental property. You get the net income every month in the nursing home. So let's say you give $500,000 and you get $1,000 back, that goes towards your nursing home costs. But when you die right now, the state of Florida is not coming after that rental property. So we have to just make sure it doesn't go to probate. So when you die, your children get that money. They sell the rental property and your children will get that money. Now there are fees. Of course, there's always a drawback. But let's say one of the companies I work with, they'll take 8%. But your kids still get 92% of $500,000 and while you were in the nursing home. So there are some creative ways that we can look at. The last one I'm going to mention, then I'll let you guys ask some questions, is spousal refusal to support. You, in the state of Florida, do not have to support your spouse. This always surprises people. You are not liable for your spouse's debts if you didn't sign on the debt. So what happens is if your spouse goes in a nursing home, we can, if you are willing to do it, now I don't have a tremendous amount of people that do this, but what happens is the scenario usually is, I'll just give you a scenario. I had a client who she was worth millions of dollars. Her husband had $100,000 to his name. And he went in the nursing home, and she called me and said, I don't want them to take my millions. And she had gotten it through a few other marriages. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, maybe it was all her money, but I'm not sure. But anyway, so basically what we ended up doing is we did this spousal refusal to support, but before we did it, we actually, the $100,000 was in a joint account. We were even able to move the $100,000 over to her. So the $100,000 went to her. We basically left her husband with $2,000 in the bank, and she was able to get him on Medicaid. So there's some creative things that we can do, and I don't know how many millionaires we have in the room, but don't be surprised, people, because a lot of your neighbors are millionaires. You just don't know it. So if you basically have any questions at this time, I've kind of gone through this stuff really quickly.
Chris,
Go ahead.
I have a question. Is it better to be a resident of Florida? I'm in 2 states right now, Pennsylvania and Florida. Is it better to be a resident here?
She's asking, I don't think you heard, be a resident of Florida. Honestly, there's no estate tax in Florida. And it used to be a big issue because of the estate taxes. Pennsylvania, I've dealt with Pennsylvania, and they generally have estate tax, like an estate tax for anything that's in Pennsylvania. So if you're a resident, let me just back. If you're where your residency is generally the last place you lived, and so what happens is everything belongs to that state. So if you say you're a Florida resident, you can still have except real estate. So what happens is I had a client that came the other day that has large bank accounts and investments in another state, but he has declared residency here. He has a driver's license. He votes here. He pays his taxes to the IRS from here. You have to do certain things to make sure that the IRS and the state of Pennsylvania know that you're a Florida resident. Because what happens is Florida doesn't care, Pennsylvania cares.
Yeah.
Because everything you own will then be taxed when you die at whatever Pennsylvania is gonna tax you. Florida and the IRS don't care if you have less than 11.2 million. 11.2, 11.4, but a taxable estate is basically, if you have over $11 million, we'll get concerned about you at this point. If you don't, then the only thing you have to worry about is Pennsylvania may have a tax when you die, Florida doesn't. Does that make sense? So I can't really answer whether you should be, I mean, there's also no income tax in Florida, so a lot of people come to Florida because they don't wanna pay income tax.
There's no income tax on your retirement fund. in
Okay, Pennsylvania either, okay.
But they do come after you. My friend's husband died in Pennsylvania, and they had been living here 15 years. And Pennsylvania came after them, and they had to fight it. So they
Well,
wouldn't
and see,
pay
the reason
taxes.
Pennsylvania would come after somebody is generally for an inheritance tax. And Pennsylvania, again, a lot of states have an amount that's exempt.
Like I'm getting-
So a lot of states may have $3 million as exempt, and anything over $3 million, they're gonna hit you with a tax on it. So they don't like you coming to Florida, because we don't have a tax. So that's, I can't really answer that individually, so,
Take your residency here.
I'm sorry, Sheila, go ahead.
I was just wondering, you mentioned the 5-year look back, what was that related to?
5-year look back is how long they're gonna look back for gifts, I'm sorry.
Gifts.
It's
Okay,
gifts.
that's all I
So,
need to
yeah,
know.
there's no, yeah.
Hi there, thanks for presenting it, we all appreciate this. My question is about age, is there age requirements on any of this? Do you have to
On
be a certain-
Medicaid?
Yes,
On Medicaid, what I'm talking about is Medicaid if you're 65 or older.
okay,
If you're under 65, you have to generally, to get the kind of Medicaid I'm talking about, have a disability, you have to be on SSI disability.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What if you're not on SSI, on SSI?
You said if you're under 65 and you need a nursing
You're
home,
disabled, but you're not on SSI, you're just on.
and you wanna get
regular
Medicaid?
disability.
I'm gonna be candid with you guys, you have to talk to me about that. I mean, that is not my area of expertise. I mean, I generally deal with if you're over 65, but I have had a few cases where someone is under 65, but that's usually very rare. Dave is gonna talk later about special needs trust and things like that, but yeah, your question, the hard thing about it as a lawyer is the question I have to ask you 20 questions to answer your question. That's the hard thing, I can't, it's not a generic answer. I'm sorry. I know it's just a shout out.
I was just to keep everything in stack, and I want to make sure you guys get your questions answered, but
Mary, do you have some time today? Okay. So if you guys want, if anyone in this room has a few other questions for Mary, Mary's gonna be in the hair salon, and you guys can feel free to ask any questions that you guys might have, of her, and she'll try to, answer them there, or you guys can set up a consultation. But we just want to make sure we got a lot of information today. We just want to make sure we can stay on track. So, but yeah, feel free to thank you, Mary, for your time today, and yeah, feel free to ask Mary some questions at the hair salon. We got a great speaker coming up next. For those that don't know, have you guys had a chance to see Florida's 5-Step Guide to Senior Care? Are you familiar with what it is? And my question to you guys is, the reason for this event, I know a lot of you that were here last week know that that's why we put this together, was to take these 5 steps, bring them to life in a live event format. But if you know anyone that could benefit from the resources that are in this book, just please share it with them. Give them the guide, help them understand how to use it. The idea is that you follow the 5 steps, and then when you walk through those 5 steps, when you're trying to figure out, who do I reach out to, then Seniors Blue Book can be that directory for you. So okay, when I'm going through these steps, I know what service I need now, or who I should reach out to. How do I find that person? That's when Seniors Blue Book would come into play, and we're gonna have Amanda talk a little bit more about that, and when she introduces Rick later in for the funeral and pre-planning needs. So with that being said, what I want to do is introduce Kevin Pillion. He is another elder law attorney. He owns a life planning law firm, and that is up in Sarasota. And he's going to talk briefly today about VA planning, because a lot of times when you're going through this process, there's benefits available to you, but you might have to have things in place in order to qualify for those benefits. So we're going to introduce Kevin. Kevin, feel free to.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me. Can everybody hear me all right? My name's Kevin Pillion. The last name rhymes with million. And I'm based in Sarasota County. We have an office in Sarasota downtown area by Selby Botanical Gardens. And we're setting up a new office in Northport where everything seems to be growing. I'm going to be speaking on the VA benefit specifically called Improved Pension with Aid and Attendance. Is there anybody currently on that benefit? One person. Is there anybody over age 65 here? Okay. Are there any veterans in this office? So we have that. So I always like to start off with acknowledging the veterans. And what's your first name? Don, what branch were you in? Air Force. Anybody else?
Army.
Army? Any other divisions?
Navy.
Navy? Navy. And keep in mind, I always do, is that we probably wouldn't be where we are with our freedoms in the United States without our veterans. So the people that are veterans, are there any spouses of veterans here? So look around and see who raised their hand. Those people are all prospective, going to be prospective candidates for what I'm going to be talking about. There's one person in this room that has this benefit. And by the way, if I have a question while I'm talking, should be good?
Yeah, if it doesn't again, we'll get you another mic.
Okay, no worries. But feel free to raise your hand and ask the question, because by the time I get further down, you're gonna forget what your question is. So those people that are veterans and their spouses are gonna be candidates for the VA Improved Pension with Aid and Attendance. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a veteran's daughter who's his caretaker.
Okay, so that's a veteran's daughter who's a caregiver. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, but technically you're not on the high priority because it's going to be the veteran as well as the spouse of the veteran. You can possibly get another benefit under the compensation. So when you talk about the VA, it's one of the biggest government agencies. And if you've ever been confused in your life, and you ever want to get confused again, you just talk about the VA. I'm talking about a pension benefit. So a pension benefit means that you don't have to be technically have been disabled during combat or in service. Those benefits are called compensation benefits. So we have two different buckets, one for compensation, who are disabled vets from service, and pension benefits for those that are not necessarily or don't have to be disabled from service. That's a huge thing, because some of the spouses here never served and they would still get that benefit just because they were married to their husband or wife. Keep in mind, a veteran can be a female, and we have some of those in our staff or some of our clientele. So this benefit has about 4 rules. And these rules kind of mimic what Mary Byrski was just talking about when you apply for Medicaid. And in fact, when you do planning for this specific benefit for pension, for aid and attendance, you best be looking forward to applying and qualifying for Medicaid. Otherwise, you're going to have a potential blow up. And the 2 rules between the Medicaid and the VA, how many of you think they kind of line up pretty well? We're talking about the federal government here, and those rules are going to be disconnected. So what you can do for the VA, maybe this one's going off and on.
I was thinking, we'll switch out there. It might be dead.
How's this? Better? Yes. And if someone has a question, I will repeat the question so you don't have to worry about running with that microphone. Okay, Chris? So the VA has 4 tests, and the first one's going to be a service requirement. And that is you had to serve during an active wartime period. So some people get caught between the Korean War and World War II, or Vietnam and Korea. So one of the big ticket items is a lot of people say they can't apply for this benefit because they didn't serve in a combat area. That's false. You did not or do not have to serve during in-country or boots on the ground. There's one exception for that, and that's going to be for the Vietnam War, and it's from the periods 1961 through August 1964. You would have had to have served in Vietnam at that time. Otherwise, you could have served in Washington, D.C. Of the service requirement, you had to serve at least 90 days, only one of which was during an actual wartime period. So you could have been in before a wartime period, but overridden by 1 day and you'd be safe. Does anybody have any questions on the service requirement? Yes.
If you were in SAC for the Strategic Air Command flying, that was during the Cold War, is that considered active?
If it's during one of these specified wartime periods, okay?
Thanks.
So some people may have served in something, we've heard about people working in or serving in the Army, Navy, Air Force. What are some other branches? Coast Guard, Marines, okay? Some people actually served in the Merchant Marines. So you wonder where that lays up. So this division, it's actually more broader than you would typically think. So don't discount the fact, well, he didn't do this or that. What if you were in the reserves? What do you think about that case? Or does that count or not? Well, the answer is, in the world, and this answer I'm going to give you applies to everything in the world as far as I'm concerned. The answer is always 2 words. It depends. That's right. Okay. And if you served in the reserves, it depends, did you or did you not serve during an active or were called up for active duty? If you were called up for active duty, the answer is yes. If you were not, the answer is no. So that's the first requirement. It's called service. Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
All right, when you talk about active duty in the reserves, does that mean you have to go to war, like Desert Storm, or can it be you go and help with the hurricane, or you do,
Yeah, so remember, the only exception is that you can serve anywhere in the world or the galaxy. So if you stayed in Sarasota, Florida, and that was where you were during the wartime period, that is going to be valid, and you passed that test. The only exception is the short period prior to the actual declaration where the Vietnam War started. So that's the, any further questions on that? Sometimes that's the trickiest question or test to get through because you don't even get the opportunity to go further in this qualification test, because if you can't get through the service requirement, you're dead in the water, okay? The second test is going to be a medically needy test. You have to be disabled. And what do you think the definition of disabled is for VA? This is going to stun you. You're in the back. What's your first name, sir? Yes.
My name's Greg.
Greg, so Greg.
I responded because my father got.
That's very good. Okay. So Greg's father has this benefit. So let's say Greg's father was kind of healthy and he could do everything pretty well, but he has some needs where he needs what's called aid and assistance. Guess what the name of the benefit's called? VA Improved Pension with aid and assistance, or aid and attendance actually. So if he needs some help with something, he's on his way to qualifying for that benefit. Do you think if you were just age 65, you could qualify for this benefit? Or do you really have to be disabled? What do you think? Usually whatever you're thinking is the wrong answer, okay? So with this benefit, as long as you're age 65, you, under the VA's rules, you are disabled. Now how does that wrap around your head? By being age 65, you are deemed disabled for this benefit. Now this benefit actually has 3 levels. One's a low income, one's a housebound, and one's called aid and attendance. And I'm talking about aid and attendance because most of our clients need this money in order to be able to pay for home care or move into what actually is called an assisted living facility. So this second test where you're medically needy or disabled would kick in when you actually have some issues with the ability to care for yourself. Unlike the Medicaid that Mary talked about, there's 2 ways you typically get in on this and pass this test, called the medical test. First, you have to be over age 65. And you're going to need aid and attendance with some of your activities of daily living. What are those activities? Does anybody remember what they are?
Probably cleaning and bathing,
Bathing, yep.
getting dressed.
Getting dressed, that's another one. So there's about 6. Medication's not one.
Driving.
That's an instrument of activities of daily living.
Driving, maybe.
So you can envision this. When you wake up, what's the first thing you do? Almost, but don't you have to get out of the bed first? Okay, let's do that because we can have a problem. So if you get out of bed, that's called a transfer. And then walking to the toilet is part of that transfer. Next thing is toileting. So we're up to 2. What's the third one? Bathing, because we're in the bathroom. Anyone gonna eat anything? That's another one. There's one more. Chris, what's the last of the Mohegans here?
Oh, man.
I'm putting you on the spot because you're a qualified guy.
You said the activities of daily living.
We just got up out of bed, we walked over to the toilet, we then used the bathroom,
Yep.
then we had a dress and bathe ourselves,
Right.
and we're gonna eat,
Yep.
eat, and eat. There you go. Now, incontinence sometimes pops up as a 6th, okay? So think about those. When I tell you those are called activities of daily living, aren't they really some important activities? When you can't fail 2 of those, you are now able and licensed to move into what's called an assisted living facility. And under Florida law, you typically have to fail 2 of those. Usually they go in groups. So most of our clients have fallen, and now they're a fall risk. So they have a problem walking and then typically toileting. So those 2 would automatically pop together. So for the most part, you fail the VA test if you fail 2 of those activities. And just step back for a second. How much money do you think we're talking about here per month? And let's say we have an example of a husband and wife veteran. The veteran could be either spouse and the other one's a non-veteran. What do you think we're gonna get per month? And first of all, does anybody like the word free? Can you think of any word better that's 4 letters in the United States dictionary? Free. $2,230 per month. That should shake your life up because most of our clients don't make that per month with their income. And think about the value of that. $2,230. What could you do with that? Well, if you went into an assisted living facility, those costs range somewhere between $2,800 and about $5,500 per month. Guess what? $2,230 does what? Nothing. It absolutely does something important. Think about that.
Pays for most of
It pays for most of it. Before you had to touch a nickel of your own money. This benefit is so rare and so nice because it makes the difference whether someone's going to have the proper place to live. $2,230 can buy you a lot of home care. So the CNA price that Mary quoted, 30 to 35, is a good price, but sometimes you can get people a little cheaper, somewhere around the 18 to 25 marker. Divide that into $2,230. You got some help that month. So the importance of this benefit is really in 2 places. 1, at home, and 2, to pay for an assisted living facility for yourself. What if you were living in an independent living facility? Would you be able to get this benefit? What's my rule, my typical answer?
Depends.
It depends. And why? We know independence doesn't count as medically needy. But if you needed help and had to hire some home health agent to come in and do it for you, and you failed 2 activities of daily living, guess what? It's paying for your care at the assisted independent living facility. So this is a nice benefit that can be pretty well rolled into different environments. So that's the medical needy test. There's one other thing that you ought to know about that, and it's different from Medicaid. Medicaid says if you have dementia, do you get Medicaid or not? And is that one of the ways you'd be able to pass the test for medical under Medicaid? Not at all. So you could have someone that's high functioning that needs to be cued, and they will not get Medicaid. That should shock your system. And we have that happen to our clients. They have what you think they know cannot live alone, but they need help. So the VA will pay out for someone who's disabled and medically needy, whether they have problems with their activities of daily living, or they can no longer live alone because of some cognitive impairment. That now of $2,230 is really important. Such people typically have to end up living in what's called a memory care facilities. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay, so many of our clients end up going there. Now the cost of those facilities isn't cheap at all. So the typical price is around $5,500. You can find them for less and you can find them for more. But that's a good number to start with. So $2,230 against $5,500, or say somewhere as low as $3,500, that is a huge help for paying for that fee. Does anybody have long-term care insurance here? There's maybe about 8, okay? To me, long-term care insurance is essential, absolutely essential. Because when you think about estate planning and how these benefits tie in, what did you not plan for typically? The cost of long-term care. And a nursing home in our area is about $11,000 per month. Go up to New York, have your checkbook ready, you'll be into $17,000 to $20,000 per month. So ask yourself how you're going to pay for your long-term care. Mary pointed out this morning that you can have $11.4 million of assets and have no estate tax. Most of our clients, in fact, all our clients, seldom ever have even close to that. There's only one thing that's going to disrupt their whole estate plan: the cost of long-term care. So this benefit is great to be able to pay for that cost. Any questions on the medically test or the medical test for the VA? Yes?
I have a question. Does the widow of a person who qualified for this, is she eligible to get this, now the spouse, but she's a widow?
That's a great question. So it's the surviving spouse of a veteran, and they could be a male or female, correct? So that spouse can get $1,210 per month because it's no longer a married couple, so that would drop down to that. And she can, so long as she qualifies under the 3 tests, or really 4 tests, but since she didn't serve, guess who would have had to have served during the wartime period? Her spouse, precisely. What if the veteran was alive and healthy, and his wife, in this case, had dementia and Alzheimer's and needed to live in a memory care facility? And this we often see. We know, who do you think is going to die first statistically? Did you come in a car?
Yes.
Would you be willing to bet your car? So the caregiver will be the first person to die. Okay? This should shock your system again. If you like to do some internet research, you do a search on the University of Pittsburgh and caregiver stress. And guess what the percentage is? That the well spouse will die before the ill spouse. 60's close. According to the study, it was 70%. Now, would you be willing to roll some dice if you know you were going to win 70% of the time? Most of us probably would. So think that always in your mind when you look at these situations where there's an ill spouse. Who do you think's really dying first? And how do you protect the well spouse? Because if the well spouse goes down, guess how many spouses you're worried about now? 2. You have what I call a train wreck. So back to that example where we have a well spouse, that was the veteran, and the ill spouse, who's the spouse who was not a veteran. And the ill spouse is going to a memory care facility. How much money you get then? It's somewhere between around $1,400 and $1,500 typically. Okay, that against a $3,500 to a $5,500 payment is huge. Because guess where the well spouse is living? At home. And how's he paying for his or her bills? and then paying for the memory care facility. So what we often see is called a cash flow problem, because people don't have enough cash coming in every month to pay for these bills. And then what you thought you were going to be passing along to your beneficiaries, your children, guess where it went to go? To pay for your long-term care, because you don't have a good plan in place. So think about all these things that could crop up. I work with a gentleman that I despise. He comes every week. Do you know what his name is? Murphy's Law. Because what you think's going to happen may not happen. And have you done a good enough job to plan for these what-if scenarios? Most people I know don't. Most of the work we do is redoing people's documents because they don't know how to protect for these VA benefits and Medicaid benefits. We have the third test. It's an income test. And the income test is basically, it's somewhat complex, but we can kind of sum it up like this for purposes of our talk today. Your medical expenses need to equal or exceed your monthly income. For example, let's say you have home health care and your home health care bill is $4,000 per month, $1,000 a week. And your monthly income is, between you and your spouse, it's always the combined numbers, is $4,000. And what other medical expenses can you think of right off the top of your head that you pay every month?
Prescriptions.
Prescriptions. As long as it's a monthly amount that's roughly the same, that counts. Anything else? Think about your Medicare. Anything coming off there? What about your Part A or B? $135.50. Does anybody have a supplemental insurance policy here? That's typically between $250 or $300. That's a medical expense. Does anybody not have a supplemental insurance policy here? If you do not, I would strongly suggest you get one and look into it. So find someone who's a qualified insurance provider. There might be one speaking later today. If you do not have that, you wants to look into that. What if you were on Medicaid and you can only have so much money? Could you pay? How are you going to pay for your supplemental insurance? Guess what? It's free. Medicaid pays for it. That should shock your system as well.
Doesn't this all depend on your income?
Yep, but that's what we're talking about right now. So I have a medical expense of $4,000, home health care, and various other things like insurance. And you're paying $4,000 for home health care. Did you pass the test for the VA benefit?
No, we didn't. They said we had too much money and we couldn't.
You talk to us, because what you're talking to is someone who's probably with the VSO. The VSO doesn't have a, yeah, so he's not a licensed attorney. He can't do what I do. I plan for that benefit. He cannot do that. It's illegal. So now I've just shared with you one scenario where that person qualifies for this benefit from an income standpoint because their monthly medical expenses are over $4,000 and the joint income from both spouses is $4,000. You just passed that test. Here's the best one. Let's go back to the example I had with the one spouse that's living in the memory care facility. They're spending $5,500 per month. Do they get a medical expense and she doesn't have home health care? What would her medical expense be? Should just zing right in front of you. You got it. $5,500. If their monthly income is $4,000, do they pass the medical expense test?
Yes.
Absolutely. So there's ways to get around that medical test. There's a creative way to do it. The VSO probably doesn't know it or doesn't want to share it with you. We do. The fourth and final test is going to be a net worth test. I got 5 minutes left, and guess what? We're finishing up on time. So the fourth test is a net worth test. When your father did it, Greg, he had a net worth test probably about a year or so ago. The rules changed upside down on October 18th, 2018. That's like the day that Columbus discovered America, or the year he did. Remember that date. October 18th, 2018. That's the date that this benefit changed completely from ever before. We now have new rules. There's a 3-year look back. Up until that time, there was a 0-day look back. We also now have a net worth test of $127,061. Before, it was somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000. You also have an exemption on the home. If you own a home that's worth $1.5 million, do you think you can get this benefit? You're absolutely wrong. And the one thing you want to walk away from Mary's talk and my talk today, whatever you think the rules are, you're probably wrong. And we're not doing that to be disrespectful to you. It's just that Mary always said there's a drawback and exceptions. Everything we talk about today has exceptions. And there's ways to work around those exceptions. The question you need to ask me, if you get your house is exempt or not, you'd have to ask me how many acres it was on. If it's over 2 acres, part of your home is not exempt. Anything under 2 acres is exempt. If you had a $4 million home and it was on 1 acre, that house is exempt for VA purposes. It would not be for Medicaid. In the state of Florida, exemption for Medicaid is $585,000. So you see these two benefits clash. And when you work with these benefits, I would advise you to reach out to someone who knows these benefits. If your net worth is under $127,061, think about going to the DSO. They're very well qualified to be able to help you. But if you've given away assets after what date?
October 18th.
I got you memorized. Good. Your world, you just disqualified yourself from this benefit. You have a 3-year look back, but this one's going to blow you away. Guess what the penalty period is? It ain't 3 years, 5 years. So this rule has become extremely complex now. So if you decide to look at this benefit, and I would highly have you look at it, to help for paying home health care as well as for an assisted living facility. So that probably cuts me to the end, but if there's anybody had a question on the net worth test, we can take that question. Any questions?
Since my dad lives with me and I sold his house, my house doesn't have anything to do with this.
That's correct. Nope, but you could still get the benefit from him. Any final? Yes, ma'am.
Well, you're talking about that look back.
Yes, ma'am.
That's if you gave money away. But what if you decided to spend money on yourself?
That's perfect. That's a great thing to do. Take a world cruise. Yep. In fact, there's people who take a cruise every year, and guess what? They just continue on the cruise 365 days a year. I'm looking to set up a business that's going to have an assisted living facility on a cruise ship. What do you think about that?
Excellent.
Thanks very much. I'll have some business cards down there on the way out if you want something. And you're a great audience. Bye-bye.
Okay, so while we are bringing up our next speaker, who I'm going to introduce you to in just a few moments, I know we have some new faces that were not here last weekend. How many of you are new to today? Okay, fantastic. And how many of you are familiar with the Seniors Blue Book? Okay, great. How many of you actually know how to use it? Okay. I asked that question because a lot of times people wait until they're in crisis mode and they don't really know how to use the resources. So I want to explain to you the first half of this book, which each of you are going to walk away with one of these today in your bags, is an A through Z directory. And for example, our next speaker, Rick Tuss, with Charlotte Memorial Funeral Home and Cemetery, is in the first half of the book under funeral and cremation. So that's where you're going to find resources like support groups, doctor's offices, audiologists, ophthalmologists, pretty much anything that you can think of. We call it resources for aging well. And then the back half of the book is where you're going to find home care, home health, and senior housing options in a nifty-difty grid format. So if you flip to the back of the book and look at that, you can compare all of these options apples to apples. So there's my spiel on how to use the Seniors Blue Book. So without further ado, I would like to introduce a personal friend of mine, Rick Tuss. If we could give him a round of applause, I'd be grateful.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? One thing I want to mention, I hope you guys really, thank you for being here, number one, but number two, I hope you realize and appreciate the value of the information you're getting today. Please listen, ask your questions, write stuff down. Most of these speakers have spoken together on other seminars before for years, and we don't align ourselves with people we don't trust. We don't align ourselves with people that we don't know are doing a good job out there in the community. So these are all tested and true professionals, and this is all free advice. So please thank these guys and get some good information out of it. As Amanda said, I'm with Charlotte Memorial Funeral Home, Cemetery, and Crematory. We're in Punta Gorda. We're over that darn bridge. It's really not that far though. We've been there since 1959 is when the cemetery was established, so we've been there 60 years. The funeral home was built in '82. The funeral home was wiped out by Hurricane Charlie, and we sat there. I didn't own it at the time, but we sat there for about 7 or 8 years. They were doing business out of double wide trailers. It kind of hurt the business, obviously. My partner and myself purchased 8 years ago. We gutted it. We totally rebuilt it. We put about $500,000 into it. It's gorgeous. And we're back. We have brought all the business we lost is back, plus some. If you've never seen it, come out and take a look. I don't want to talk just about us. I want to talk mostly today about pre-arrangements. That's what we're here for. It's so important that you make some pre-arrangements when it comes to your financial planning, when it comes to your Medicare, when it comes to everything. But really, when it comes to your funeral planning, you really need to look into doing something. And I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but how many folks here have been involved with making some sort of arrangements after a person has died? A bunch of you. How many of you have made some sort of plans for your own arrangements when you pass away? How many have actually funded those plans, paid for them? Okay, that's a pretty good percentage. How many have just decided you're not going to die? You're just going to skip that whole process, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You need to make a plan. In the state of Florida, there are a lot of different ways you can kind of make arrangements for your final arrangements, for your cemetery, for your funeral, for whatever it is that you're going to want to do. Anything you do in the state of Florida is very well protected. It's this and California, I think, are the most highly regulated states in the country. If you were to come to a funeral home, my funeral home or any of the other ones in town, that can do pre-arrangements. Not all funeral homes are allowed to do pre-arrangements. You have to pass a fairly strict test. You have to be worth X amount of money. You have to have X amount of money in the bank. You have to have a very clean record. The person running the funeral home has got to have a very clean record. And once you pass all those tests, then the state will say, okay, you can go out there in the community and you can sell pre-arrangements to people. So if you do take advantage of one of these pre-arrangement plans, there's a couple ways that money, that plan is funded. There's either a trust, the money either goes into a trust or it goes into an insurance vehicle. We do both. It just depends on your needs. If you were to come to my place next week and sit down and do a pre-arrangement with me, let's say you spend $5,000. I have got to put 70% of that $5,000 into this trust fund by the end of the month. It's got to be in there. We're allowed to keep 30% just for operating expenses, to keep the lights on. But that 70% sits there forever. We've got plans that we're fulfilling now that have been arranged for 30 years. And it does gain interest, and that's what assures that when the person passes away, we take that money and we're covered. We can pay for that pre-arrangement. We can't touch that money until we give the trust company a death certificate and prove that you've died then we can get our 70%. So it's pretty foolproof. It's 100% refundable. If you move, if you just decide you don't like me, you want to go to another funeral home, whatever the case may be, you just want your money back, you get 100% of your money back, not 70%. If you give me, you would get the full 5,000 back if 15 years from now you decided you wanted to cancel. So there's really very little risk in doing a pre-arrangement. With the insurance plans, it's a little bit different, but it's basically the same thing. It's an insurance plan that you choose to fund your pre-arrangement. There's very little chance that anything can happen to disrupt a pre-arrangement plan. If you quit making payments, you would lose the money. I mean, if you had made, $1,500 worth of payments and then decided you didn't want to pay anymore, you just didn't pay. That money, what we would do is if you come back in 10 years and re-up, then we'll give you a credit on that amount of money. These pre-arrangements are also transferable. Let's say that you had made a pre-arrangement many years ago up north. You come down here, you're not going to use that one up there anymore. We can usually transfer it down to here. Now, it depends on the state, it depends on the funeral home, it depends on the level of cooperation that we're going to get from the northern funeral home. But we can almost make sure that somebody can transfer and still be made whole down here. So you're not locked in. If you've made arrangements up north, you're not really locked into being sent back up there when you die. You're not locked into losing that money. You can come see me and we'll look at it and we'll see what we can do. Even with cemeteries, people have many times made cemetery arrangements up north, and now they're down here. They don't want to go up there anymore. Their life is here. And in many cases, we can get with that cemetery, we can sell your cemetery arrangements up there, back to the cemetery. I just got finished selling, I think, 6 mausoleum crypts up in New York for a gentleman that came down. He bought crypts with me. I advertised his crypts up there. We sold them. He made money on them, actually. So you don't feel like you're locked in. They're pretty portable. All this stuff is pretty portable. And along the lines of making pre-arrangements, making a plan, you can do what is called, at my place anyway, and I would hope most of these other funeral homes are doing this, what's called a non-funded pre-arrangement. And what you do in a case like that is you come in, you decide what you want. Look, I want to be cremated, I don't want any services. I want to have a traditional service, I want to have a viewing, I want to do the whole thing. You sit down with, in fact, her husband works for me, he's one of my people. You sit down with one of my pre-arrangement specialists or myself or my other funeral director, we're all licensed to do this, and you let us know how you want things done. We do everything we would do as if you were paying for the pre-arrangement, but we don't take your money. We do what's called a non-funded pre-arrangement. We get all the vital statistics that we're going to need for the obituary, all the vital statistics if you're a veteran that we're going to need to file for any kind of benefits you might have coming. We make a file on you. We give you a couple little cards that go in your wallet saying that if I pass away, when I pass away, call Charlotte Memorial Funeral Home. And so you're very well covered. The only thing you're not doing with a non-funded pre-arrangement is what? Locking the price in. But that's what a lot of people like to do. They just want to, they want to get their wishes down. They want to tell their kids that, look, use this place when I die, use this place, they know what I want. They're not worried about locking the price in. Because when you fund your pre-arrangement, the price is locked in. It can never go up. We've got people, like I said before, we've got people that pre-arranged 30 years ago. They'll pass away, we'll pull their file, and they may have paid $900 on something that's $4,200 today. And that's just the way it is. I mean, they don't pay another dime. When we get their money out of trust, sometimes it has kept pace with inflation, sometimes it hasn't, but that's on me. I've made the decision to enter into the contract with the state saying that I'll provide these pre-arrangements, and so we have to provide those. We have to, if there's money that has to be added to that prearrangement to buy the casket or whatever, that we'd have to do that. So you can do it by funding it, you can do it by not funding it, either way. But you need to do something. I mean, even if you take a piece of paper and write down what you want to do and sign it and stick it in a drawer. Because the difference between making a plan and not making a plan is day and night. We have people come into our office, every week this happens. Someone passes away, we give them a call, we meet them the next day, they come in, they don't have a clue if that person wanted to be transferred up north to the family plot, whether they wanted to be cremated, whether they wanted to have a viewing, a reception, military honors. We'll sit with them literally for 3 or 4 hours, trying to do the best we can. They're on the phone talking to kids, they're on the phone talking to brothers and sisters, trying to say, did he ever say to you what he wanted to do? This happens all the time, as opposed to the people that have made a plan of some kind. They come in, and it literally might be 30, 40 minutes, and we're done. It's just a matter of signing some forms, some permissions, some things, and that's all there is to it. And we have a couple tools that we give you. One thing we give, and I know some folks out there have seen this before, it's called 5 Wishes. And this is just a document that you can fill out and let your kids know where it is. This tells people what kind of decisions you want to be made for you if you're incapacitated. It tells them what kind of medical treatment you want to have. Do you want to have heroic measures? Do you not want to have heroic measures? How comfortable you want to be? Do you just want to be no pain? I don't care if I'm loopy, I just don't want to have any pain. How you want people to treat you? That sounds kind of silly, but you've heard the horror stories of people that are in a coma, but they can hear everything going on around them, and they hear people talking, and they can't respond. This actually goes to that length. It says, look, if I'm in a coma, don't assume I can't hear you. You know, don't start saying anything bad about me. So some of that sounds silly, but this is a really, really good tool to have in your toolbox. The other thing we have is what's called a personal planning organizer. This book is something, and we'll give you this for free. If you come see David or Timothy or myself and just say, I want to get one of these organizers, we don't just hand these out because we like to sit with you. It takes about 20 minutes, and this organizer is a place to list where all of your bank accounts are, all your personal information, all the information that we're going to need to do an obituary, all the information we're going to need to get your veterans benefits. Everything is in here. So if all you did was come out and get one of these, fill it out, tell your kids where it is, don't put it in the safety deposit box, because if you get killed on a Friday night, they're not going to get to it until Monday morning, if they even can get to it. So, and it's, all you have to do is put a piece of Scotch tape on it so nobody can open it and see all your personal information. You know, put it in a desk drawer somewhere, tell them where it is, and at least get that much taken care of. Everybody gets one of these at our place, whether they prearrange or not. So if you do want one of these, let me know. I can make arrangements to get you one of these. The other really, really important thing I want to mention about prearrangements with you guys is shop around. I mean, this is kind of my mantra. And obviously I want you to use us. That's how I feed my kids. But there's 3 or 4 funeral homes in this area, and they're okay. You need to look around. It's just like buying a car, it's like buying a house, it's like choosing an assisted living place. Why would you not want to shop around when it's that big of a decision? Someday before you get sick, some Saturday, some Monday, whatever, when you're looking for something to do, this is going to sound silly, but get in your car, go drive to Roberson, take a look, go drive to Larry Taylor, go to Case Ponder, come to my place. Seriously, walk in, see how it feels, how are you treated, grab a price list. They, by law, they have to give you a GPL. They can't refuse to give you a GPL. Check the parking, check the cleanliness of the place. It's just like buying anything else. and then you're gonna make an informed decision. So many times, people will have a death and they'll go to a funeral home just because that's the last place they went to a funeral, or their parents used it, or their brother used it, but then they're not happy. You know, you talk to them, I'll talk to people all the time that have gone to a funeral home and we're not pleased at all. So do your homework. It's not that big of a deal. Take 30 minutes in each place. And a little plug for my place, what we do, and this is a way we spend our money on advertising, anybody that comes out to Charlotte Memorial, we're right next to Walmart on the North Jones Loop Road. Anybody that comes out there and just wants to walk through the place, we give them a $20 gift card to either Publix or Walmart. Just walking through. We're not gonna try to sell you anything. We're not gonna, lock the door and make you stay in there. It's just so you have an idea what the place looks like and you can ask your questions. One of the big questions that people always ask is, who does your cremations for you? People don't realize most places don't have their own crematory. So you may get picked up from the place of death, taken to a facility, and you think that's the end of it. That's where the person's gonna stay. Not the case usually. You usually then, a couple days later, you're put back in a car, you might be taken to Palmetto, you might be taken to Fort Myers, might be taken to Sarasota for the actual cremation. And some people don't care, they say that's fine. That bothers some people, knowing that the person is kind of going up and down the highway. Find out if they have the funeral home has their own crematory. That's always a big one. I wanted to mention some veterans in the group here. Thank you again from me as well. We have out of my cemetery, we do have a veterans section out of my cemetery. You have to be a veteran to be in our section. You have to be a veteran to be in our veterans mausoleum. And you have to be a veteran to be in our veterans columbarium, which is for cremation. And that said, we also have a very nice Veterans National Cemetery up in Sarasota. It's about, it's gonna take you an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes to get there right off of Clark Road. But it's extremely nice. It's the government, it's government money, everything is top notch. And what we do at my place is we will take a veteran there at no cost. In other words, if a veteran wants to use the veteran cemetery, whether they're cremated or whether it's a casketed situation, part of what we do is we'll get the veteran there for nothing. We just feel that that's the least we can do for you guys. There's a charge, obviously, for the casket. There's a charge for the funeral, but there's no transportation charges either way. So that's something that we want people to know. One kind of misconception that veterans has, a lot of times veterans come into me and they think that the VA is going to pay for their funeral. They don't. There are some benefits. Once again, when the gentleman was talking about, it depends. If you were a retired military, if you were a certain rank, there are a few other benefits you can get other than the normal benefits. Really, the normal benefits are mostly cemetery related. If you go to the National Cemetery up in Sarasota, or any of them, there's a really nice one up in Brooksville as well, you get a space in the ground, you get the burial vault, which is the container that goes around the casket, you get your opening and closing at no cost, you get your marker at no cost, and you get your honors at no cost. That's for the spouse. Well, the spouse doesn't get honors, but she gets everything else. That's for the veteran and his spouse. The spouse can pass away first and still be interred at a veteran cemetery. That's another question that comes up quite a bit. There are, like I said, it depends on your rank and how many years you were. There's a few other benefits you can get, but there's not a whole lot. The veterans used to give you $455 to use however you wanted. They discontinued that several years ago. I don't know why they did that, but they did. So, any questions in general on pre-arrangements? Any questions on transferring stuff down? Any questions on veterans benefits that you might have coming to you? Yes, ma'am.
Do you transport the spouse also, or what are the charges?
No, we don't. For no cost?
Yeah.
We don't. We'll transfer the veteran at no cost, not the spouse. We will do the cremated remains of a spouse at no cost. I live in Venice, and I mean, this sounds silly, but we'll take a spouse's cremains in as well. Yes, I'll just on the way home, somebody take them up there. that you do get honors regardless of whether you come to you can come to a private cemetery, you can come to the national cemetery, you cannot use a cemetery. If you just have a service at a church and you want to have military honors, you get that. They'll come to you. They'll come to wherever you're having the service. They'll come to a park. If you're having a celebration of life in a park, the military will come there and give you your honors. You don't have to be at a national cemetery. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
This is really a gruesome subject, so I thought I'd lighten it a little bit. Your company cremated 3 of my many Rottweilers, and the third one was so large he wouldn't fit into the regular wooden Rottweiler box.
Right.
And so I got this personal call at work, and they said, "Hey, Toby won't fit into the Rottweiler box. Would you like us to order?" And it'll take about a week. Irish Wolfhound box, or would you like him to be in the Rottweiler box and you can have a little tiny box that you can carry around? And I said, "I'll take the little tiny box. I'll stick him right next to me in the car." And so I thought that was just a really wonderful thing.
That wasn't my company. We don't do pet cremation. No, we don't do.
That's where I took him.
Not to Charlotte Memorial. No,
Out on Jones Loop.
That's Royal Palm. That's Royal Palm Cemetery, and they have a crematory. It's on the other side of the interstate.
Oh, okay.
We only cremate people at my place. But it's a very good organization. I send people to them all the time. Actually, they do a very good job.
When they want their dogs cremated.
When they want their dogs cremated.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Any other questions? I've got some brochures back there on the table. If anybody does have any interest in the facility, grab one of those. And other than that, I thank you for your time.
If you guys have any other questions too, Rick's going to be here for a little bit. So if you guys have any private questions you'd like to ask him, feel free to do that. He'll be in the hair salon or the movie theater area. So we're going to bring up another speaker here in a second, Jeff Tamas. I know just a little plug for Rick too. When I don't know if you've ever been, who's been out to his place, Charlotte Memorial? I mean, have you been out there recently since it's been redone?
And I just want to say, we met Timothy, call him Timothy, I call him Tim Taylor. It's wonderful, I was very impressed.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful place. I mean, it feels like a 5-star hotel when you walk in.
One more thing, it was Tim Taylor that sent us here to Chelsea Bridge.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Tim's been a good resource. Well, I'm going to introduce Jeff Tamas. He's going to talk about making a financial plan. We're going to talk about long-term care insurance and then wealth preservation. So this is going to be a great topic. This is extremely helpful when trying to figure out, what do I do next? How do I pay for care? How do I pay for some of these things that we're talking about today? So I know when I first heard of his company, Modern Woodmen, I thought it was a bunch of guys that were carpenters that got together, but it's not. They're financial advisors. They're true professionals. So I'm going to let Jeff talk more about what he does and how he can help you guys. So thanks so much, Jeff.
Check. All right. Hey, good morning, guys. It's morning still. Hey, you guys hungry? Yeah, me too. I'm going to keep it quick, all right? So hey, like Chris said, my name is Jeff Tamas. I'm a financial advisor with Modern Woodmen of America. The company's been around since 1883, so quite old. And I'm the managing partner, so I oversee a 4-county area here in Southwest Florida with a focus on retirement distribution and also wealth preservation. So that's where a lot of my education lies. Is this too loud, Chris? Is this good?
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
Come on, we're about to be set.
This is good. All
I'm
right.
adjusting this.
Much better. So anyhow, we're going to jump into some key topics that Chris thought, Chris and the team thought that would be beneficial for you guys, to get that information. So some of the things we're going to talk about is long-term care. What is it? Long-term care insurance. What is it? What are some basic price points, and what are some of the caps on it? And things like that. And also, with wealth preservation, what's the most tax-efficient way to pass your money to the next generation or whoever you want, whether that's a not-for-profit or church? Because let's just face it, at the end of the day, we can't take it with us. So I'm just going to jump right in. And so here's some statistics on long-term care insurance. The percentage of all federal domestic spending that goes to the elderly is 46% of the budget. That's a big chunk. Average annual health care costs for older Americans who earn more than $30,000 a year is $11,000. That's a big number. Here's a real big one too. Percentage of total long-term care hours that are provided from unpaid caregivers. I'll read that again. Percentage of total long-term care hours that are provided by unpaid caregivers is 84%. That's a huge chunk. And then how does it affect the quality of life for people? Chance an individual will have more than $25,000 in out-of-pocket long-term care expenses is 1 in 5. The percentage of unpaid or informal caregivers that are women is 75%. And more than 80% of the time, when women pass, they pass single. That means 80% of the time, guys, we go first. Because we do stupid things sometimes. And the women can shake their head going, yes, that's absolutely true. So looking at some of that long-term care there's so many options when it comes to long-term care insurance. And ideally, the younger you get it, the more cost-effective it can be. And it's subject to underwriting. If someone is terminally ill or extremely unhealthy, the chances that you can even get long-term care insurance is slim to none. And the industry is interesting because it's always vacillating with prices and things like that. So whenever you get this long-term care insurance in place, typically the younger you get it, you get a lower price point. Now, the prices can never be necessarily locked in. Now, they can't come after you and say, oh, you're unhealthy, your premium's gonna go up. But they can look at someone your age and your demographic, your pool of people, and say they're being extremely pricey, so guess what? Your premiums are going up and you can't control that. So what does long-term care insurance pay for? It pays for things such as like a lot of services that Chelsea Place offers. And it gives people some peace of mind. And navigating the options of long-term care insurance can be very complex. And there's never a one-size-fits-all. So part of the objective of the financial advisor is to sit down and listen to you. What are some of your concerns? What would you like to see happen? And then to deliver a simplified solution to you. And what are some ways that people can fund long-term care insurance? And we're going to get into that in a little bit as well. Here's another stat that 1 in 3 workers will provide long-term care for their parents. So that means they will be leaving, in most cases, their full-time job to get a part-time job. And to prepare for those things. And I'm prior military service, so big shout out to the veterans here. One thing the Army always taught me was expect the best, but be prepared for the worst. And just to understand those things and have options, because whenever you get to a point and you have no options, it's very stressful. It's like you paint yourself into a corner. There's nowhere to go. However, I do know that the more options you have when you get to a fork in the road, you could choose what is best for you in that situation versus someone deciding for you, you not having a choice about it. And so the more options you have, the better off you're going to be. And so looking at, how do you fund the long-term care, there's a lot of different ways to fund long-term care. And looking at that is sometimes people can use assets like 401ks that jobs provided. And looking around the room here, probably the majority of people when you guys were in the working field, if you still are, they had pension plans. Pension plans are gone right now. Like less than 1% of American companies outside of government entities have pension plans. You know, so if you have a pension plan coming in, or if you're on a set income, how do you navigate some of these expenses? You know, there's a gentleman who's going to be speaking, you know, I think 2 more time slots after lunch, as he does reverse mortgages. And sometimes people are sitting on all these assets, but yet they're stressed out. I had one of my clients, she owns 2 homes, one in Sarasota, one in Port Charlotte. She bought one in Port Charlotte to be closer to her family, but the one in Sarasota didn't sell as quickly as she wanted. So we looked at her pool of assets, and she came in, she's 76. She was so stressed out, she had sores. That's how stressed she was about her financial situation. But she was also sitting on a lot of assets. So when she left, she literally hugged my neck out of the office, you know, and there was 2 people sitting on the bench and looking at me, what do you do? You know, I just help people navigating. And so sometimes when people come into the office, it's not, you know, sell, sell, sell. It's here are your options. This is why. And in your situation, this could be 1 or 2 of the best solutions for you. And sometimes we talk ourselves out of business. If you have everything set up and you get everything exactly what you need, we'll say stay put. And we grew 40% locally last year as a company. And that's by doing the right thing for people. And so coming, you know, with long-term care, there's something called exclusion periods when you sign up for long-term care insurance. And it's anywhere from 0 days up to 100 days before your benefit kicks in. So you could be paying, let's say annually, $4,000 or $5,000 a year annually, and that could pay out a monthly benefit of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a certain amount of time to pay for services, nursing homes, different things like that. And there's some other interesting stats, and I can get you guys that specific website I pulled that data from, and that was hot off the presses this morning, that data. And I'd be more than happy afterwards to get you that so you could study it yourself. So looking at how do we fund things like the long-term care is, sometimes people are sitting on assets, IRAs, or you know, the IRAs are individual retirement accounts, and sometimes you have to take money out of those. At 70.5, the Internal Revenue Service is going to make you take what's called RMDs. You have no choice. And then in that year, that money is considered taxable to you as income. And if you're not careful, that could also make your Social Security benefit taxable. Social Security benefit, if you're a married couple, you earn over $44,000 in any given year, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit is now taxable. And sometimes you can accrue an extra $4,000 to $5,000 a year in extra taxes because you made too much money. And the older you get, the more RMDs you're gonna have to pull out, and there's a percentage. And so how do you avoid paying those taxes? Just by avoiding some of that tax bill, here's extra money you have every year that you get to keep. So as the financial advisor, we look at navigating all these things and what are your best options. You know, and also a married couple, you know, if they're below the standard deduction for the tax year, you know, there's a potential where you could pull money out of an IRA or a 401k 100% tax-free, as long as you're under this threshold. And last time I looked, tax-free money's good, right? I mean, unless you guys, there's someone at the IRS you love so much, you love giving them your hard-earned money. No, look, I even made you smile. You were sleeping 5 minutes ago. Well, thank you. So it's navigating all these things, and then also towards the end of life care is what's the most beneficial way for you to transition your assets. You know, and looking at that is there's a couple ways to enhance that transition. There's really only one thing out there right now that money goes from generation to generation tax-free. Can anyone guess what that is?
No.
Life insurance. Life insurance is one of the only things that passes tax-free from generation to generation. So literally you could do a paid-up life insurance of $250,000, you could dump in, let's say, $200,000, and the death benefit could be worth $300,000 immediately. And now that money's not taxable, and you just saved. You know, because at the end of the day there's tools and resources here to plan for next stages in retirement, and then also to maximize what you have. Like, how do you make $1 do the job of many? And so looking at long-term care is a very important component, and there's also a different vehicle out there that you can use instead of long-term care insurance. There's certain types of cash value life insurance that you can access the death benefit prior to you dying. All right, you can just specific what I'm talking about. You can access up to $250,000 of this benefit if you're disabled, if you can't do 2 of the 6 daily activities. And the check gets cut to you directly, and then you say how the money gets sent out. That being said, is in essence, let's say if someone has a $500,000 life insurance policy and you take $250,000 out to pay for healthcare costs, whatever situation it may be, there's a lot of variables. Then in essence, it puts a lien on the life insurance policy. So now when you do pass away, it pays out $250,000 tax-free instead of the $500,000. So this way, instead of dumping, and I'm not saying long-term care has its place. You know, that's if you can qualify, and so does this cash value, this living benefit of this life insurance, where you can access it if you need it. If not, it goes tax-free to your beneficiaries. You know, so there's a lot of different, there's so many different, you know, vehicles to use, but it's systematically looking at what's important to you, and then here are your best tools under the current tax law that you can accomplish it. You know, in retirement distribution, once you retire, you work so hard saving all this money, you get to that stage. Now it's two major concerns that pop up. 1, do I have enough money? 2, will it last as long as I will? Because the biggest concern that people have in retirement, it might sound weird, but if you live too long. Because the longer you live, it compounds or multiplies every other factor you have. You're going to get sick. You're going to run out of money. You're going to see another stock market crash. So it compounds all these other issues. So people look at things like guaranteed income. You know, so you take a pool of money and you would, in essence, convert it into a monthly check you can never outlive. It's almost like a self-funded pension. The pension is you work somewhere for 20, 30 years. How many of you guys got pensions in here? Let me say pensions. Okay, awesome. So some of you guys know what those are, and they're great, or they were great. But in essence, here's a pool of money. You dump it into this vehicle, and it pumps out a guaranteed monthly benefit for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter if you live to 140 years old. It never stops pumping out monthly income, and it's not attached to the market. So we look at a concept, if you can imagine, paychecks and playchecks. Your paycheck is what you need in the door every single month to pay for Medicare supplements, insurance, taxes, food, electricity, and we look at, this is your paycheck. It's taken care of. The rest of your life, it's taken care of. Now, if you have other assets and IRAs and stocks, bonds, 401ks, here's your paycheck money. Here's your cruise money, here's your, whatever it is. You know, here's your extra money. But to guarantee that you're gonna be safe in your home the rest of your life, no matter what happens, it's important. You know, because the thing is that if you do need long-term care, you get to a point where you have to spend on all your assets. In essence, you become a ward of the state in some situations. You're gonna go to a facility they tell you to go to, and you're not gonna have options. And I would never want that for anyone in here. The more options you have, the more comfort you're gonna have. Agreed? So looking at that as long-term care has an important place, long-term care insurance, so does guaranteed income and wealth preservation. How do you move it from one generation to the next? In the most tax efficient way, because at the end of the day, that is our biggest business partner, is the Internal Revenue Service. And how do you strategically, legally, sever it? So, I'm not gonna keep you guys much longer. And I will be here chatting with you guys, and I have my wife back there as well. We got some information, some bags to give you. This way you can put all the other stuff you got in the bags as well. So what questions do you guys have? Fire away. Long-term care, investments, taxes. Yes, ma'am.
What sort of price range is that insurance that comes out for that kind of?
Oh, as far as
The premiums?
you talking about the cashback life insurance?
Yeah, the alternative to long-term.
Right.
care, like.
It all goes by age and health. You know, so this is where the underwriting comes in. And you apply, it goes through the underwriting process, and then they come back with an offer.
Would you say it's comparable to an annual long-term care value?
It can be, yeah. Yeah, it really can be. And so it gives you a little more flexibility. However, it's when we look at what type of assets do you have, because you really, it might be in your best interest to go the long-term care route. And so everyone's situation is so unique. I've never seen some person that exactly has the same thought process, mindset, and also their wishes to be carried out upon them passing. So, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
What happens to the money you put into the guaranteed income when you die?
Good question. There's a great option. It's called a cash refund option, which is one of my favorite. And let's say if you put $200,000 into this guaranteed income, and you spend $100,000 of it and you pass away, $100,000 of remaining money goes to a beneficiary of your choice. So there's really no lose on it. And so you can also, if you married, you could do what's called a joint 2/3 survivor, meaning you get a monthly income. If you pass away, your beneficiary, typically a spouse or even a grandchild or daughter, they can get 2/3 of that benefit. So if it was $1,000 a month, they would get $750. And so there's options. But I really like the cash refund option because it's the ultimate kind of insurance policy that you'll never outlive your money. You know, also it's proven that people with pension plans, including government workers, postal employees, they live longer. Two main reasons. One, they want to get as much money out of it as possible. And then secondly, they're not stressed. You hear in the news the stock market crash, you open up your IRA statement, I lost $20,000. And then all of a sudden you're nervous, you don't want to go on vacation, you don't want to go on a cruise, you don't want to do this. Is that what you work so hard for to get to? To worry? No. So, but yes ma'am. I guess it's subject to underwriting, right? So looking at that is there's a list of terminal illnesses, different things of that nature. But I could have a specific conversation with you because I could spend here probably about an hour and go down the whole list, and she'll definitely go back to sleep, and I'll lose the rest of you. I'm only teasing. I can have fun, right? You're fun. Okay, that's good. So, any other questions? Bueller? No, we're good. So I guess we're all set, man. Thank you guys so much, and we'll be here after, right?
Can you guys hear me okay? Let's see here. Turn this guy up a little bit. Hey, what a great speaker lineup, huh? I mean, we gotta just give a round of applause for taking the time to come out on a Saturday and share this information with you guys. We think this information is valuable. If you have questions for Jeff, he'll be in the back. He'll really answer those questions for you guys. We're getting ready for lunch. How many of you guys are hungry? You guys hungry? All right. So what we're gonna do this time is everyone's gonna serve you. If you guys want to line up, and we're gonna have the plate set up. We're gonna have everything set up for you guys, and all the girls will serve you whatever it is that you want, whatever you desire over here on our tables. If you guys have any questions or for us, for Chelsea Place, or about the rest of the day, please let any of us know in this CP teal colored shirt or the Seniors Blue Book girls in the back. And then we're going to wrap up this afternoon with reverse mortgages, Medicare versus Medicaid, And then we're also going to be talking about VA. If I were to qualify, if I were to qualify with my assets and stuff like that, and I didn't need to do any estate planning for that, how would I go about qualifying for VA benefits here through the county? So Ivy Winkler's going to follow up this afternoon. So reverse mortgages and then Medicare versus Medicaid. So we'll talk to you guys here in a little bit. Enjoy lunch, and if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks, guys.
But I love you. How's the baby watch going?
It's going. We got May 11th due date. It's crazy.
Feeling good?
She's doing really good. Yeah, I think more than anything, I have a lot of like things on my agenda for April, which is like causing me to be a little. Like stressed out. Like I didn't realize when May 11th, that's just the due date. It doesn't necessarily mean that it could happen today. I'm like I'm waiting for that phone call. She's so like. I think Netflix with the pop.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he's super active. He's just everywhere, like just squirming and putting his hands everywhere and jumping up and down. And like he's ready to go.
Good, good. Emily's getting better about the whole situation.
She literally, like, she is. We were at parties every weekend and she was falling asleep and 6.5.
We're leaving.
Okay. All right. Bye, Miss Ruth. Bye, Ruth. Thanks for coming today.
She's following that lady around?
Yeah, so she was really following things. 6.5 on the road, and Emily's just like following everything. Right? Then it sits next to her, and the lady bringing her. Emily's just she's ready.
Good. It's excellent.
It's an exciting time. You know?
This is a good seminar you're putting on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming. I know.